Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so thank you all for being here. And there are so many great ideas in the chat about the ways that we would like to see Aurora changing and the ways that we would like to see it really focusing on people. Again, the main topic for our panel discussion tonight is about the ways that we'd like to see Aurora be a safe place for students to get to school. And so we have three people who are here to talk to us about that, who have lived experience of getting to school at a school near Aurora. So our three panelists are Rowan Foster, a high school student at Ingraham, and he's done some research on his own about transit and getting to school, and so he'll talk to us about that. And then we have two parents, Justin Martin and Chris Rule, who have students who go to school in schools around Aurora, along Aurora, and they are both advocates for making the street safer as well. So welcome, the three of you. I would love to invite each of you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your connection to the schools along Aurora. And I think we'll begin tonight with Rowan, if that's okay. Rowan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Rowan Foster. I'm a junior at Ingraham High School this year. I think that's the main connection, is I just go to Ingraham and I'm right next to Aurora 5 times a week, every week.
Thank you so much. And Chris, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris Rule. I just moved, but for almost 9 years, I lived at the corner of 92nd and Fremont. I have a 4th grader who goes to Daniel Bagley. So that involves crossing Aurora twice a day.
Thank you. And Justin, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, Justin Martin. I've lived in the area just a couple blocks from Aurora for over a decade now, and have 2 kids that have gone through school here. My older one's currently going to Eagle Staff, and so we've been getting to and from school with her, and more recently sending her off to get to and from school by herself with her friends. And I've also been involved in our kind of neighborhood greenways group for quite a few years, and working on projects throughout the neighborhoods, including some near or even crossing Aurora. So that's kind of some of my background. And
great. Thank you so much, all of you. And welcome again. So pleased that you could be with us. I'm curious if you can just describe what you observe as you either go to school yourself or help your children to get to school, and specifically if you have observations about the ways that students are getting to school, and any concerns that you have about how that process works at the schools that you're most familiar with. And I see he's taking a drink, but if we could start with Chris on this round, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. Because of work schedules, etc., for me, sending my daughter to school has involved mostly getting her ready for the bus in the morning, but then picking her up by car. For a while, when I was commuting from downtown, it often could make sense for me to use the E-line, get off on the rapid ride downtown, and pick her up at the Boys and Girls Club, and then get on and go a couple of stops and get home. What I would say is that where I was living, there was a big improvement when there was a new crosswalk put in at 92nd Street in Aurora. It is just makes the street feel a lot narrower, makes it feel like a lot safer crossing. And I don't know how much I am just experiencing, being a parent more now with an older child, and how much things have changed since that was put in. But especially during the pandemic, I could really notice a lot more kids walking themselves and with their friends down towards Aurora. from the surrounding neighborhood. So they are clearly using a sustainable method to get to school. In contrast, I think when I go by Cascadia Elementary, which is just a couple blocks from there, it's all car. And so I think for very small kids, there's still, it's still a lot harder to give up that like level of freedom for them to group, or you might need some like a walking school bus type of thing to make that work. But it's also hard to get kids going that early in the day.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Justin, do you want to comment on your context and what you observe about kids getting to school?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion, partly because one thing is clearly, as the kids get older, that opportunities and challenges and ways of them getting to school change, right? And in general, in elementary school, kids are accompanied to school. Middle school is really when a lot of people start being willing to let their kids get themselves to school by certain means. And then I think probably high school, most kids are just independently getting there. So to Chris's point, I mean, the Eagle staff and Cascadia, I mean, I guess technically they're kind of separate campuses, but it's all in one large super block. And so that's an interesting one, because you have the elementary school, and it's kind of a unique elementary school in that it's the I forget what the term is. The public schools have kept using, changing their term, but basically for advanced learners. So it draws from all over North Seattle. So that one is a little unusual in terms of elementaries, in that a vast majority of the students don't really live within walking distance there. So that kind of defaults to a lot of them, and they're so spread out that the busing isn't very efficient. So I think that's why we see a lot of people driving to that school. So yeah, the Eagle staff, though, it is a very large attendance area, but I think there are quite a few kids within walking or potentially biking distance. We live kind of on the cusp, but probably about half a mile from the school. And so we actually started out biking with our kids, with our daughter there. And yeah, unfortunately that tapered off quickly, as the kids weren't super stoked about biking to school necessarily. But then my daughter's bike got stolen from the school. And then we came to find out it was about the 5th or 6th bike, for the year, after 2 or 3 months into the school year. This was last year. And anyway, so that's pretty disheartening, because it's, they do actually have a nice bike rack that's covered and up right next to the school. It's not even along the street. So, I mean, to be honest, I feel like that's partly a byproduct of the school's location. If it were a kind of, I don't know, it just seems like it's perhaps a relatively higher crime area in the Aurora corridor, especially with the petty theft. And so, but at any rate, biking and walking to school, I mean, I think a lot of kids do bike and walk. So as the Greenways group, we advocated for, before that campus opened, as it was being kind of renovated from the previous school there at the site, we advocated for getting a safe route to that school site. And it was kind of between doing some sort of major improvements on 90th, or putting a different crossing in, and ultimately the city decided to go ahead and put this other crossing at 92nd. And so we predominantly used that last year, because I live on the west side of Aurora, so the kids, and a lot of the kind of attendance zone is on the west side of Aurora, so a lot of kids are having to cross Aurora. Anyway, so a lot of kids are using the 90-second crossing, and it's nice because it's basically cars can't go across there. It's just for pedestrian and bicycles, and it kind of is designed to connect into other greenway routes. However, interestingly, I think just because of how the attendance zones are broken up, there's a whole lot of kids coming kind of from the south and west. And so for a lot of them, it's like 2 extra blocks out of the way to get up to the 90-second crossing. So as it turns out, the vast majority of kids use the crossing at 90th, who are crossing Aurora nearby. So at any rate, I guess I won't go on for too long, but I could, talk more about some of the specifics there. But I think just getting across Aurora is one of the biggest kind of challenges for getting to and from school. And I should kind of throw out there that also that my wife actually took on as a part-time position and worked as a crossing guard. And she was there at that crossing at 92nd and Aurora for about 6 or 7 months last year. And so, I'm kind of coming in with her shared experience of that as well. And, the much more kind of longer time of observation of what was going on there. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we're veering into our next question, but I want to make sure that Rowan has a chance to describe his observations of students arriving at Ingraham and departing from Ingraham. What is your observation? I know you've done some research among the student body there.
Last year I did a survey, and like pretty much like 75% or so people reported that they would drive to school, which matches like the people I know too. Very few people like walk because similar to Eagle Staff, it's a lot of the same like zoning. So they're all in like Ballard or North Ballard. But it's all just like people trying to cross Aurora from like a mile or 2 away. So it's like just long enough that you don't really want to walk it every day. And then like biking isn't super popular. I think we have like a bike rack or 2, but they're always like pretty empty. And it's only at one of the entrances, and there's like 7 at Ingraham. So most people drive, because it's also like way quicker for most people because the route network from KC Metro just like isn't really there. Because like if you live right next to Aurora, you can take the E line, but then people don't really feel safe taking the E line because of all the other issues that the E line has. And then it also like often takes longer. Like one of my friends lives probably it's like 1.5 miles away, so it's like a 5-minute drive I think for them, but if they wanted to take the bus it would be like 15 to 20 minutes every day, and it's often late for that bus too because just bus issues. I don't know, but Ingraham is also lucky we have a really big parking lot compared to other high schools, so it makes it way easier for people to drive. A lot of driving.
Great, thank you.
Rowan, I'm curious, do kids typically carpool when they're driving, or share rides? Or
I think it's pretty rare unless you like live pretty close to someone. But also like you're talking about Eagle Staff, and I also went to Eagle Staff, and I can definitely agree that like almost everyone I knew lived in Ballard, and Eagle Staff was like deep Ballard, closer to Ballard High School. So
thank you. So our next question is about barriers to taking sustainable ways to school, like walking or biking or school buses or public transit. And I think we've already named several of those barriers, like the lack of bike parking, especially secure bike parking, and the prevalence of bike theft. The fact that it's just hard to get kids up early enough to take a route to school that is not the absolute quickest. For the younger students, requiring parents to accompany them, and especially when their route has to cross Aurora and requires a crossing guard. And so I've heard those barriers. I wonder if there are additional barriers that you'd like to name to encouraging students to be getting out of cars and into more sustainable modes of transportation to and from school. And we can start with Justin this time, since we've given the other two an opportunity to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit on a lot of the barriers. You know, and yeah, to your point, I think the issue of safety and security, you know, I mean, especially for the biking, I mean, it just seems like it's such a challenge, you know. I mean, I think there's also kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, like a, you know, social stigma, like it's uncool, the biking thing. So that's more of a broader societal thing. You know, but I feel like also the more we make it easier, and you know, the less we have just other associated problems with, you know, like bike theft and so forth. You know, you make it feel better, and like, you know, it's not an afterthought, and people do it more. And to some degree, I feel like it's the same thing with walking, I guess. You know, one thing I've noticed, I feel like there could be some operational solutions. And I guess going back to the my comment, or our comments about the crossing guards, you know, so basically, as far as I know, Eagle Staff and I believe Cascadia only have one crossing guard position. So, you know, potentially getting more, because they could only place one crossing guard, and they, you know, they located that person at 92nd, which was the kind of official safe route, despite the fact that that there were more kids crossing at 90th. But I think because it was a more kind of official, I don't know, not official, but just, I don't know, it's not more signalized. The one at 90th is signalized. You know, my wife did observe people running the red light there at the pedestrian crossing occasionally. And so, you know, whether people think that that's more acceptable if, you know, if there's not a risk of like hitting a car rather than a person, I don't know. So getting more kind of crossing guards, I think, especially for the middle school and elementary schools. Oh, and then another thing was for those, you know, a lot of people going down 90th, and I'm sure this occurs on others, you know, kind of primary access streets too. There tend to be a lot of there's a few an area with some townhouses and stuff, and everybody seems to leave their trash cans and stuff just out on the sidewalk. Kind of, there's just not much space. And so just looking at, you know, along the kind of preferred routes, I guess connecting to the schools from Aurora, improving those conditions as well as conditions along Aurora, you know. And like I said, some of that doesn't even need to be infrastructure upgrades so much as just, hey, let's, you know, work with the residents to make sure to keep the sidewalks clear and that sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Rowan, do you want to comment on that? Any additional barriers? Oh, and I see in the chat we've got a question, and we can even answer here about the possible reduction in a barrier by removing the fee to ride Metro. So if you'd like to comment on additional barriers or that attempt to reduce barriers.
I don't know how much that one actually had an effect, since we already got our SPS students have gotten free worker cards for I don't know how long, but ever since I've been using them. I think barriers are just well, since I'm pretty sure most of the school lives on the other side of Aurora, just crossing Aurora as a person or as a bike just isn't a pleasant experience. And I think that's got to be the main one at this point, since especially bikes, because I don't think there's really like a bike crossing except for maybe like 130th, but that one is such a massive intersection, so I would not want to cross that one. And then I think that's the main one, just better crossings and more sidewalks too, especially because there's a street connecting Aurora to Ingraham that everyone takes, and there's just like not a sidewalk for part of it, since it's not that, like, the person who owns that property didn't decide to build one. So it's just, then people are like walking across a really active roadway, and that's always not great to watch. And that's for everyone like who is trying to get to the E line, which is a lot of people, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Rowan. And Chris, would you like to comment on additional barriers to using more sustainable modes of transit to get to school?
Oh, I mean, I think part of it is people's schedules are busy and they have a lot of activities that are not often in convenient places, and time's compressed, and in addition to that, some of our schools, especially the high schools, are really representing serving a broad swath of the city, and so that it makes it hard for people who are not in their own neighborhood necessarily to make those choices, especially when we don't have the kind of transit coverage, say, that we would really like to have in terms of frequency and coverage. Those are some. And then I think in the terms of Aurora in particular, as you go up further north, there are uses that are not very desirable, and activities that you don't want to encourage your child to be around, unfortunately. And so I think that is a significant barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think Rowan also referred to that as just not pleasant to be walking along Aurora and to be trying to cross it as a young person, for sure. So thank you for naming that as well.
Could I just jump back in? Those comments kind of reminded me, of just one other thing in terms of, there's a lot of businesses along Aurora, and I feel like, I guess this comes to mind because in particular at 92nd, at the crossing they put in specifically for Eagle staff and Cascadia campus, there's an auto shop that's been there for years, but they, during the business day, are very busy with cars being, arriving and leaving and moving them back and forth, a lot of moving around. And they seem to do a fairly decent job kind of being aware, but they're also, a lot of moving quickly, and also do tend to encroach on some of the sidewalk. So again, working with the businesses, I think and I think it's important to maintain businesses along Aurora, but to make sure that they can do so in a way that, respects the, need for people to move around by walking, biking, transit, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing you mentioning two things. One is just drivers turning in and out of driveways all along the corridor, and then also the way that that's impacting the businesses. And in different parts of the corridor, they're closer or farther away from the actual roadway and the parking lot. There's all those different features in the different parts of the corridor, but they all play into whether a student is safe to walk along there to get to school. So thank you for naming that as well. So our next question departs a little bit from the going to school or leaving school, but I'm curious about other ways that you see Aurora impacting your experience of school or your child's experience of school. How does being near Aurora impact the school other than getting to and from school? And let's see, I think we're back to letting Rowan start.
I think the main effect that I would feel every day is just getting lunch, because everyone goes to Aurora to get lunch, and almost no one walks, since all the restaurants that you get to on Aurora are behind massive parking lots. To get the Starbucks, which is very popular, is to get to it, you have to either drive, which is what most people do, and then it's always a mess because you have to do a weird left turn from 137th, or cross 130th and then sneak behind the senior housing buildings. But if you wanted to walk there, you'd have to walk right, cross 130th, and then there's no sidewalk from 130th to the Starbucks, so you're walking kind of just in this weird ditch, and there's often giant semi trucks that are unloading stuff for all the other restaurants there, or there's the Elliott Bay auto traders, or there's just cars everywhere there. It's super dangerous, as Casey was saying. Yeah, it's such a nightmare. So just no one walks, and then everyone is just driving there. Same with the more people walk to the like Sprouts that's right next to on the like 130th entrance. But then to get to like the other restaurants, it's like you just kind of walk through a big parking lot, and it's really sort of gross to be in that area unless you can like park your car and get to the restaurants like Rain Cafe and the other really Kiki's, which is also really popular.
Thank you. Yeah. Chris, how would you describe it for a younger student? How does Aurora affect being in school?
I would really like to be able to say, oh, just walk on home if you're in a pinch, or and I've only biked to that school with her when she's been on the bike just like once, because so much of the year it's dark, and even with good crossings, you just never know, given the experiences that I've had and other people I know have had. I think it's kind of tough when you're crossing that street, and not just crossing it, but building in extra distance from the school to make those choices.
Yeah. So making it so that your student can't get home on their own, and increasing the distance that you have to go with them. Yeah. And did I get that right, Chris?
Yeah.
Thanks. And then Justin, how would you describe the impact of Aurora on being in school beyond just getting there and back?
I think it's just the overall feeling like it's not as safe of a corridor. I mean, there's the traffic issue, and I feel like that's one thing, right? It's just like this giant kind of wall trying to get across it, and there's not even very good, as Rowan was saying, in most places there's not very great or any facility to really go along Aurora walking or biking. Down south of 105th, I mean, we do have a sidewalk in various conditions, but it's mostly there, at least. But I think the other part, besides the traffic issue, is just the, I don't know, I just the feeling of safety there. There just seems to be a lot of kind of social, issues and things going on there, and I don't know exactly what the solution is, but I do like seeing, I guess, more housing going in along Aurora. I mean, I feel to some degree, if there's just more people there, more eyes on the street, more people like, being there because they live there and coming and going, that helps improve the safety.
Yeah, thank you. So we've talked, I really like that description of Aurora as feeling like a giant wall, that students are on the other side of a giant wall when they're at school. And I think that really gives me a lens into the way it feels for families who are sending students, whatever age they are, to school along Aurora. And so we've talked about a lot of barriers to students being able to use their school building or use the safe routes to school, that the sort of safe routes to school that may exist. And so Justin, I think it was you who said, I don't know what the whole future is, and it's hard to put that all together, but I wonder if each of you would just name one first step towards a future Aurora where it feels like it's a place where kids are safe, where it feels like a place that is designed for the people who are using the corridor, especially for our context, our school students. What would be the first step towards a future Aurora that would support and enhance the school community rather than make it be a place where it's more dangerous to get to school? And I apologize, I've lost track of who went first, but I think maybe Chris's turn. Is that right? Chris, would you like to start us out?
Not really. I'm just not sure how to narrow it down to one thing.
Well, then give us your top three.
Yeah, I think what Tom just put in the comments about the sidewalks going in is going to make a big difference. And what Justin about what he mentioned about eyes on the street, that's a really slow process of getting new housing. So I'm hesitant to say that's the number one thing, but definitely having more people around, and maybe more business uses there that really focus more people on the street rather than kind of drive through and drive up type businesses. Although that is also going to take a long time. It seems like at each business cycle, we will slowly get a little bit of that, but those things will take the longest versus some of the smaller interventions that could be made right now that I hope could be identified in this study that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you naming that. When we look at that long-term study and process for changing the road, it definitely feels like, people like Rowan will have graduated before we see some of those major improvements. But hopefully we'll start to see the ways that the roadway is changing before some of the younger students have graduated. And Rowan, who knows, you can come back and you can see it later. Let's move to Justin. Justin, would you name one or two or three first steps?
Yeah, I'll go with two: trees and sidewalks. Just making it feel like a hospitable environment for, more than just moving through in your car. To me, you just go to that, section down just around 80th, and it just feels like a different place to me with those nice mature trees. And unfortunately, I think the reality is there's just not space for everything, and there's not space for 7 lanes plus trees plus sidewalks that aren't in conflict with the trees, but there are tools to solve that. And I think part of this study that's coming up is starting to look at what are the priorities. Do we need to take back a little bit of that space from automobiles? And even if we can't give up any of those 6 lanes, maybe we can take the median for segments and put trees there. And maybe we can get developers to set their buildings back a few feet and put trees behind the sidewalk. I think they did that at one of those storage places that they built. But I'm glad to see there is some redevelopment. I do see a number of projects going on that I'm not sure what they all are, but I think some are housing or include housing. So, but just making it feel more like a place people want to be rather than to move through.
Sorry, we hear that frequently, that making places for community to gather, making it a place for the more spaces, green spaces, urban open spaces, so that it does feel like a place that you want to be and not just a place that you're moving through. Yeah, thank you for naming that, Justin. Rowan, would you like to name a couple first steps?
I think a lot of the ones that are coming to the top of mind right now are just build the things that the city said they would, which I think the big one, they're I think 2 years from now, they said 2024, which is after all graduated, but they're going to put a signalized crossing at 130th and Ashworth, which is huge because there's a bus stop right on the other side of that, which that'll be great when they finally do it. Hopefully, probably be delayed like everything else they build near our school. Also, there's building, I think where the LA Fitness is, they're supposed to build a bunch of housing, which is awesome. I think another big one is like Justin and Chris were saying, just trees and sidewalks, especially on the west side of Aurora between 130th and 135th, because it's just so awful and there's no trees. Or the giant Amazon Fresh parking lot is always super empty, and I feel like they could take some of that parking lot back and plant stuff there. Or they don't even need to move the buildings back to plant trees there already, because it's already so massive. I don't know what they did there before, but it's just empty now. Yeah.
Well, thank you, all three of you. I really appreciate your willingness to be with us tonight and to share some of your ideas. I see lots of things going on in the chat. I'm not seeing a lot of questions, although I haven't been reading them super carefully. So if there's someone else who has been reading the chat and can report back to us on some of those questions, that would be great. We do have time for a couple of questions from our gathered audience for the panelists. One of the things they're pointing out, Rowan, about your idea of planting in that large parking lot is that there is an open ditch there for the stormwater drainage. And so there is an opportunity there to think about how to both provide some canopy cover as well as provide the permeable surfaces for the stormwater management as well. So yeah, it's definitely a spot for watching how we can improve that area for sure. So other questions that people have for our panelists? I'm not able to see hands if they're raised, so please use the reactions in Zoom to raise your hand, because that will raise you to the top of the screen, or just put your question in the chat. And if we don't have questions from our gathered audience, that's okay too. I know there are some other things that we wanted to talk about tonight, and so we can move on to those things. But if anybody does have questions, now's a great time to share them. All right, Tom, I think we're going to turn it back to you and hear some more about some of the upcoming events. And again, thank you to our panelists. It's so wonderful to have your experience and wisdom with us tonight, and to hear what it's like for the different schools that you represent and the different ages of students that you represent. And so appreciate your wisdom that you've been willing to share with us today.